screen so you can all see my presentation, little deck. Okay, welcome. This is our very first virtual workshop. And in the spirit of Saturn and Aries, of starting things and being a pioneer, you all are the first attendees to something like this with Lora. So thank you for being the first. Thank you for being pioneers, and thank you for joining. I'm so excited to talk about this shift, to talk about the astrology of this moment. So just a little bit about me. I'm Michelle. I'm an astrologer, and I work as the head of astrology here at Lora. So it's really exciting that we're finding ways to bring astrology to a bigger audience, to more people. And it's been so apparent how many people want this and are excited about this. So it feels like a really special moment. And I want you to know that we're going to have a Q&A at the end of the workshop. So if you have questions during the content, during the presentation, just throw them in the chat. And Alexa and Michelle, who is our beautiful Lora team here today, they will be monitoring, and then we'll be able to ask me those questions during the Q&A. So with that, I think we're going to hop right into it. Are we ready to hop in?
Yes.
Definitely.
Let's do it. Okay, amazing. So today we are talking all about Saturn. We're going to talk about the planet Saturn, how it operates, its big move from Pisces into Aries. We're going to talk about Saturn returns. We're going to talk about Saturn in your birth chart. So we have a lot to cover, so we will get right into it. Okay, so here's your little keyword cheat sheet for Saturn. Okay, so feel free to screenshot this. If you're ever like, what's Saturn again? Just look to these words, and they can give you a big slew of just things that Saturn represents. So I'm going to draw your attention to the center of the image here at the words, the should God. I think this is such a good representation of what Saturn is all about. I went to Oxford this summer with the Faculty School of Astrology, and this amazing astrologer named Darby Costello, who's like a real OG, she had this amazing class all about Saturn, and she called Saturn the should God. So I just want to give her credit. That is where I got this from. And what does that mean? Saturn is the force that is kind of bearing down on you and telling you what you should and should not do, how you should and should not be. Saturn rules boundaries, any kind of constriction or structure to our lives, right? Which can be seen as kind of a negative with constriction, but also is necessary, right? We need structure in order to thrive in our lives. Saturn is all about responsibility and commitment. There's a duty around Saturn, right? And with that comes a lot of themes of tradition, like these are the way things are done. These are the way things have always been. And with that, Saturn is kind of the Lord of time. And that's why Saturn can rule delays or, forcing you to be very patient in some areas, because it does rule timing with structure and things like that. Saturn is really the strategist, Saturn wants a strategy and a reason and for things to have a purpose, right? It's not just willy-nilly. There is a reason for every single thing that Saturn wants. And I put the two signs here, Capricorn and Aquarius, because every sign has a planetary ruler, and Saturn rules both Capricorn and Aquarius. Now, these are more ancient rulerships in modern astrology. So once the outer planets were discovered, Uranus was associated with Aquarius. But I think it's helpful to look at Saturn in relation to both Capricorn and Aquarius, because it kind of does show the two different sides of Saturn. So when it comes to Saturn ruling Capricorn, it's really about that hard work, ambition, consistency, stability, right? Productivity. And when we look at Saturn ruling Aquarius, and that might surprise you, right? That might be okay, Aquarius feels really different than Capricorn. But what Aquarius has about it is Aquarius has a massive sense of commitment to society at large, to its community. It wants to be of service. Aquarius is very much about humanitarian causes, and Aquarius is very future focused. It wants to really strategize about the future. So it brings in that kind of strategy element of Saturn. And at the end of the day, Saturn's a lot about life lessons, and we'll get into that. And it also is the planet of manifestation. Like, I know manifestation is this big buzzword, and Saturn sometimes feels like, this like tough thing that we just have to deal with. But what Saturn does is it provides structure to our visions, right? It provides a roadmap for us to actually achieve the dreams and the visions that we have. So let's talk about how this can all manifest in the birth chart. So when we look at Saturn in your birth chart, there are a few things you want to be aware of. The sign that Saturn is in, that's important. But at the same time, everyone born within like a 3-year radius of you has Saturn in the same sign. So to get a little bit more specific, look at where Saturn is in terms of the houses in your chart. So what house it sits in within your chart. And then what I think is really the most important thing and the most personal when it comes to Saturn in your birth chart is the relationship it has to other planets in your birth chart. So does Saturn sit with Venus? Does it sit conjunct with Venus? That's going to have a really big impact on your relationships. Does Saturn oppose your moon? That's going to have a really big impact on your emotional state and how you were raised. So really looking at the planetary aspects of Saturn, I think, is like the most interesting way for you to understand your specific relationship with Saturn. And of course, layering on the house and the sign on top of it. And where we see Saturn in the birth chart, right, making these relationships to different elements of the chart, you might feel a little constricted in that area. You might feel like there are some delays that come in that area of life. You might feel a really heavy responsibility in that realm in your life. You might feel a really big commitment to something there, or even like that is where the big lesson of your life lives, right? And that's like the lesson you're learning over and over and over again in your life. Saturn can tell you a lot about that. So let's talk about the timing of Saturn. So yes, you have Saturn in your birth chart, right? You're born, Saturn's in a certain position, and there's birth chart, right? Natal Saturn. And then there's Saturn in the current sky, transiting Saturn. So I'm going to call it natal Saturn and transiting Saturn. And when you're born, think about this as a new moon. Natal Saturn is in the same place as transiting Saturn. They're together. It's like a new moon. And then you start your life. And transiting Saturn continues moving while your natal Saturn is always the same, right? So as transiting Saturn is moving, it is moving you forward in your maturation. It is moving you forward in your evolution of becoming an adult. And there are some key moments when it comes to your life and when it comes to Saturn. And the first is the first Saturn square. So this happens when you're around 7 years old. And this is where it's like a first quarter aspect, right? Saturn has shifted 4 signs ahead from where it was when you were born. And this is the first Saturn square, or rather 3 signs ahead. And this happens when you're 7 years old. What does this mean for your maturation? When you were 7 years old, this is around the time where it's like your first time going to school, having to do things yourself, having to go out there and make friends. You're no longer a baby, right? Like you are becoming more independent. You have new interests, like you have things that you love and that you're really into. So it's this first kind of level of independence at 7 years old. So that first Saturn square. Then 7 years later, we have your Saturn opposition. And this is when you're around 14 years old. Now, this one is, I'll just say it, puberty. This is a big part of maturing into an adult. So you have this physical moment with the Saturn opposition, and think about this like a full moon, right? Transiting Saturn is opposing your natal Saturn, and it's creating a big physical change within you. So you go through puberty, your body's changing, maybe you have your first kiss, right? You are, in a different level of school where you have a lot more independence, right? You're not in elementary school anymore. You're kind of going class to class on your own, exploring new friend groups. So that's a big new level of that like kind of physical maturation in your life. And then we have the second Saturn square. And think of this like a third quarter moon. And that's when you're 21 years old. And of course, this is like the legal age of adults, right? You know, in the US, this is when you can legally drink. It's when maybe you're finishing up with school. Maybe you move away from your parents' house. You're away for the first time and you're really on your own. So this is like that next level of maturation with Saturn. And then in 28 or 28 and a half years, you reach the infamous Saturn return. So it is a new moon yet again. Saturn returns to where it was when you were born. And this is really the moment, that first Saturn return is really the moment where you are no longer the child of your parents and you become an adult in your own right. And the Saturn return is where we find a lot of people dealing with structural changes, right? Saturn is all about life structures. And we deal with structural changes around our career, our relationships, our home, where we live, like the really big stuff that feels like it's all kind of changing at once. And this Saturn return is a big moment where you step into adulthood. And then, you know, it keeps going on. But this cycle of Saturn is really the cycle of becoming an adult and really maturing in your own way. Now, what's really cool about this is that if you are approaching your Saturn return, or if you're in your Saturn return, you've experienced it, look back at these times. Like really journal and think back. What were you doing at 21 years old? What were the issues you were dealing with? What were the key themes? Do the same for 14 years old. What was going on in your life? What was going on in your love life, in school? What were you really interested in? What did you want to be when you grew up, when you were 14? 7 years old, what like characters were you really into? What were your favorite activities? What were your favorite hobbies? These things can so literally tell you the themes that will come up in your Saturn return. So it really is so, you know, specific to you. And these moments can be really great hints as to what's to come in the Saturn return. So now I'm going to go through what Saturn is like through each house. So how it behaves in a birth chart, and then potential Saturn return experiences. Now, before I even get into it, I want you to know, like, this is just looking at Saturn in a vacuum. So you might think, oh, like that isn't really me. That isn't what really happened. You might have other planets in these houses, right? You might have other planets aspecting your Saturn. You likely do. So I'm not taking any of that into account when I look at these explanations, but I think what this can be really helpful with is understanding how Saturn operates, how it affects certain areas of life, and what Saturn returns can potentially be like. So I'm going to take us through each house. You know, when we get to your house, feel free to like take a screenshot of that, save it for later. And really just getting a sense of like how Saturn works through the houses. So let's start with Saturn in the first house. So if you have Saturn in the first house in your birth chart, your identity is tied to your sense of values and your morals. Like you have this very strong sense of responsibility. Your moral compass is what drives you. Like for you, it's like, it has to, like, it's about right and wrong. You know what I mean? And you actually may come off a little bit standoffish to people. You might, like upon first meeting, be a little bit closed off. And that might be tough because, you know, you might really want to connect and be really friendly actually, but for some reason people kind of get this standoffish vibe from you from the beginning. And then potential Saturn return experiences with Saturn in the first house. We're talking like massive shifts in your identity and your persona. So I know that sounds really broad, but like the way that I like to think of this is like the way that you introduce yourself changes. Like maybe you get married and change your name. Like maybe you completely change your career path and like you introduce yourself differently at a dinner party. Like you just totally change the way in which you present. And there can be changes in your appearance. And then you can also be forced to take on greater responsibility. So in your life, just have this sense of big responsibilities that you have to take on. Okay, Saturn in the second house. So in your birth chart, this can give you a sense of being really committed to financial stability. Like you require this very strong sense of security. And I think that it can come both ways. Like you really want to have this security, you really crave this amount of money in your bank or what have you, but it is actually tough for you to get it. You feel like it's never enough. Like you feel like you never have enough in the bank, or you don't have enough stuff, or like there's this feeling of lack when it comes to material things. And throughout your life, like you're really like learning about what is truly valuable. What does value mean to you? And potential Saturn return experiences here include changes in how you make money, and any kind of financial setbacks. And you may be learning lessons in detaching from physical objects and money. So you might go through like losing a physical item or money, and then you have to like grapple with what that really means and not tying your value to the amount of money in your bank account. Saturn in the third house. So if you have Saturn in the third house, you might be a bit shy to speak up, and you're really learning how to actually express yourself. The third house is all about communication. So I think it might be a little bit tough for you to kind of get your point across in the way that you want to. Third house also rules siblings. So if you have siblings, you're definitely the responsible one within the sibling group. And some potential Saturn return experiences include learning the ability to advocate for yourself, speak up, like really finding your voice. There can be changes in sibling relationships or even historical friendships. Like we're talking like old friendships, like lifelong. And then actually we see local travel in the third house. So you might have like lots of local travel. You might like be traveling around your area a lot, even like some domestic travel. Saturn in the fourth house. So in your birth chart, it feels like you have a lot of pressure coming from your family. Like there's a lot, like you have this duty to be a certain way, to act a certain way, to accomplish certain things. And, you know, you have these like tough familial obligations. You also may have a harder time connecting to your feelings. You might be a bit like more closed off emotionally. So some Saturn return experiences include moving homes or cities. That's like classic for fourth house. You may be forced to take on more responsibility in your family. Like I see like taking care of a sick parent or something like that. And then on the flip side, you could actually release yourself from the lifelong pressure that's come from your parents and family. Like I've seen with Saturn in the fourth house, people actually decide to, you know, maybe they felt like they were forced to live near the family or with the family, and they actually decide to move away based on where they want to be and kind of take on more of their independence outside of the family unit. Saturn in the fifth house. So here you are committed to living a creative life. Creativity is so important in the fifth house. And with Saturn being there, you might need to learn how to like let loose and have fun. It might be hard for you to just like have a hobby that's just fun. Like for you, like all your hobbies are like a side hustle or like a business. You know what I mean? Like Saturn just feels like it needs to be productive. Also, fifth house is where we see children. So having children might be important to you, or just like kind of like a big theme in your life. So potential Saturn return experiences include committing to a new creative project or hobby. This is a big one. Also having children or making a decision regarding children. And also with the fifth house, because we see creativity and pleasure here, we actually also see like dating and flirting and kind of like fun romance in the fifth house. So you might experience like a new romance, new flirtation, or just like a new commitment to dating. So Saturn in the sixth house. So in the birth chart, you are focused on your health, like lifelong, you are on a health journey. And you feel really obligated to be of service as well. For the sixth house, consistency and routine is so important. Like having your rituals is everything. And potential Saturn return experiences with the sixth house, you may face a health challenge that you need to overcome. A really popular one with the sixth house is making dietary or lifestyle changes. So I see people get sober. I see people go vegetarian. Also, just like creating new daily routines in your life. Like you might commit to a new daily routine during your Saturn return. And then lastly, you may change jobs. So not like completely career paths, but you may like take on a different job within your current company, or you might just change jobs to something similar. So Saturn in the 7th house. So in your birth chart, the 7th house is what everyone wants to know about relationships, right? And when Saturn is there, you're actually a really grounded presence for the people in your life. Like you're like everyone's rock. You know what I mean? And you might feel a lot of pressure to be in partnership, but at the same time, it's kind of hard for you to open up in relationships. Like you're kind of always there for everyone else, but when it comes to like you leaning on someone, that's a bit harder for you. Potential Saturn return experiences include starting a new relationship, experiencing a breakup, getting married, very common, and then even committing to a new business partnership. So it doesn't necessarily have to be romantic, but sometimes going into business with someone is common. Saturn in the 8th house. So in the 8th house, you are on a journey of learning how to be more emotionally vulnerable. Like in the 8th house is where we really dig deep and discover like our emotional patterns and why we feel the way we feel and why we are the way we are. And it can be really kind of heavy and deep in the 8th house, but there are a lot of lessons that you have to learn around your emotional patterns. And 8th house also represents intimacy in our relationships. So with Saturn there, intimacy can feel a little bit taboo to you. And it may be kind of hard to open up intimately with partners. Saturn return experiences include, you could experience an emotional breakdown. Sometimes it's just necessary. You know what I mean? It's never fun, but an emotional breakdown could be in your cards for an 8th house Saturn return. You could uncover deep-rooted emotional patterns that no longer serve you. So like these patterns that come from childhood or trauma that you decide to really face and then like work on letting go of. You could sign a big contract. We actually see contracts in the 8th house. You could also inherit money or experience payment delays. So the 8th house opposes the 2nd house. So there is that theme of finances there, but it's less about like you working and making money and more about like you getting money from other means or partnerships. So there could be some kind of money that comes in or payment delays there from other kind of entities. And then you could make some realizations about your sexuality and what you want in that realm and being able to open up more there. Saturn in the 9th house. So you are a forever student. The 9th house is all about higher learning and exploration, and you are really committed to exploring and learning lifelong. Travel and cultural experiences are very important to you as well. So some Saturn return experiences here are taking a life-changing trip, committing to higher education, like starting grad school or deciding to really further your education. You may publish writing, like 9th house represents publishing as well. And then you may just be called to learn about a new topic in general. Like maybe in a 9th house Saturn return, you decide to learn about astrology, right? So you're just called to learn about something new. Curiosity is like super, super high. Saturn in the 10th house. So in the birth chart, there is this pressure to excel in your career. There's this pressure to be like a leader in your career and be really successful. And you take on leadership positions at work for sure. In terms of work, like you may feel like nothing is good enough. Like there may be this constant like need to just like do more and more and more, but like you're never satisfied. And when it comes to Saturn return experiences, big career change for sure. You may take on an elevated position at work. And the 10th house is also where we are seen, where things become visible for us. So you might have moments where you become more visible. Maybe you start posting online, maybe you go viral. You could also just have some press-worthy moments where you're like more seen in the world. Saturn in the 11th house. So your community is what grounds you. Your community gives you purpose. Like your friendships, your group of friends, so important to you in the 11th house. And there is like a responsibility to maintain the friend groups, right? Like you feel like you have to be the one to like always get everyone together. And there can also be an obligation to a humanitarian cause as well. So Saturn return experiences include changes in friend groups, right? You might have friend breakups, kind of shedding some groups. You might find a new sacred crew, like you might find this new community that's really aligned with you. You can have a revelation about a new revolutionary idea. Like the 11th house is very much the house of the futurist, you know? So you might have this big vision for something that you want to accomplish. And then you may also commit to a humanitarian cause in a big way. And lastly, we have the 12th house. So in the birth chart, this is a journey of connecting with your spirituality. It's a journey of connecting with your intuition. And it might feel like it's hard for you to connect with that intuition, but you are learning how every day throughout your life. And you even may prefer solitude, Saturn in the 12th house. And sometimes you can get stuck in the past. Like you can get like kind of really stuck, just like harping on the past and memories and stuff. So some potential Saturn return experiences here are you could have a spiritual breakthrough, commit to a meditation practice, or you may want to kind of escape for a while. Like you might want to feel like you just like want to disappear from it all for a little bit. So with that, let's look at some examples. So I have a couple examples here of some anonymous client charts. Okay, so let's look at what this is. So on the inner ring here, we have this person's birth chart. On the outer ring, we have the transiting planets. So these were the planets in the sky during their Saturn return. So this is the symbol for Saturn, and we see it right here. So we see natal Saturn in Aquarius in the 12th house, conjunct the ascendant. So it's not only going to be 12th house themes, but it's also going to pull in some first house themes because we're very, very close to that ascendant point. And we see transiting Saturn matching up right there. So what happened with the Saturn return? So basically this person had a spiritual awakening. They had this moment where they were like meditating and they uncovered some hidden like memories from childhood that they had like kind of forgotten, and they came back into their psyche, into their consciousness. They started meditating. They ended up living as a nomad, which I know you might think sounds more ninth house, but really it was like kind of getting away. You know, it was like, I'm going to like live away and just kind of like be a little like reclusive. And then with the first house themes, they totally changed their appearance. Like they grew out their hair, they got a beard. Like it was like, they look totally different from before their Saturn return to afterward, which was really that first house theme there too, with the spiritual themes of the 12th house. This next example is right here. So we have birth, Saturn and Pisces, conjunct Venus in the 5th house. So really the themes of relationships and dating are in here because 5th house, we were talking about dating is associated with it. And with Venus there, so much with relationships too. So in this Saturn return, this person, it's funny because it also sits with Mercury. So it's like Mercury, Saturn, and Venus. And Mercury is more about friendships. Venus is more about romantic relationships. And this person ended up falling in love with their best friend. And with the 5th house themes during the Saturn return, it was very much like this game of like, will they, won't they? And there was this constant kind of like flirtation. But as Saturn does, they decided to commit to each other in actually a romantic, dedicated partnership. So those planets, like the planets that Saturn is touching, is very important to look at as well. So that's a bit about you. That's a bit about the Saturn return in the birth chart. And I want to kind of shift gears now to the shift that we're experiencing right now as a collective and understanding the themes that we're leaving, Saturn and Pisces, and the themes that we are going to, which is Saturn and Aries. So Saturn and Pisces, I'm just going to take a sip of water. So Saturn and Pisces started in March of 2023. And it went through, of course, right now, February 2026. And some themes of Saturn and Pisces. I mean, first of all, Pisces is the last sign of the zodiac. So it's got to be about endings, right? It has to be about kind of like the big surrender. It's this big, like, letting it go because it's the end, it's the finish. And Pisces is the mutable water sign. Pisces is like an ocean. And when I think about Saturn and Pisces, I think about this like clearing, this cleansing, because it's like the ocean, how it just washes it all away. I think a lot of people experienced loss during Saturn and Pisces. A lot of people, especially going through their Saturn return, they had to face an ending. They had to face a loss of something. And it was really hard. And I think because of that, there is this heightened commitment to spirituality, to this heightened commitment to, you know, understanding that there is this greater purpose to the things that happen. And it's not just about the loss, right? But it's about like, why is this loss happening? And having that bigger mindset. With Saturn and Pisces, we're more like looking at the past, right? Like even like, you know, Y2K obsession, like, you know, everyone's like obsessed with 2016. Like we're just like looking at the past, and like even in the culture, like we're all very just like, you know, kind of recycling old stories, old narratives in the media. And like, it's just like more about looking at the past versus moving forward. Right. And I think like with Pisces, it's a lot about that reflection point. It's about like, okay, this is the end. Like, let's kind of look back on everything that's happened. So that was kind of the prevailing theme of Saturn and Pisces. So now we look to Saturn in Aries. So I know this may seem confusing. May 2025, Saturn in Aries. We got a sneak peek last year of Saturn in Aries from May through August of 2025, before it then retrograded back into Pisces. So there is a bit of an overlap here, which is interesting. So I really do want you to think about like how May through August of 2025 was for you, because that's going to give you some clues as to the theme of Saturn in Aries for you. But so we're going to be looking at Saturn in Aries through April 2028. And I'm just happy that like we're leaving Saturn and Pisces in the past, because Saturn in Aries, like it is bringing in this new energy. It is a new beginning. Aries is the first sign of the zodiac. Aries is the one that gets it going. Aries is the one that takes the leap, that takes the risk, that has courage to do it. Like Aries is the cardinal fire sign. So we are taking action. We are beginning again. And I really think it's refreshing for a lot of us to feel like it is a new beginning. And there is this like new sense of wanting to be independent and having your own point of view on things and not doing what everybody else is doing, and really focusing on like what you want to work on and taking action as a whole. It's also very creative. Like Aries energy is like that soul spark. It's literally like the idea of creation, right? It's that first breath of the zodiac. So really like being able to go for something, like we're going to be learning a lot about going for stuff without thinking too much about it. You know what I mean? Like just taking the risk and being a bit more brash, you know, in our approach, and not like kind of walking on eggshells, you know, like we're stomping right in there. And I think it'll be a big lesson around that, and a big lesson as a society of like, what do we want this next era to look like? And it's interesting, before we get into the Neptune conjunction, like Saturn in Aries, Saturn doesn't love to be in Aries. Saturn likes rules. Saturn likes authority. Saturn likes fairness. Aries doesn't want to follow the rules. Aries doesn't care who the boss is. Aries is the boss, right? They're not going to listen to anybody. Aries doesn't want to know how it used to be done. It's going to do whatever it wants. So Saturn's kind of like it's kind of fumbling in this sign of Aries. And I think it's interesting when we're working with a bit of a stunted Saturn, how that helps us. You know, we might be losing a bit of our structure and our strategy here, you know, but it will kind of stir us to action and stir us to just go for it without thinking. So with that, those are the general themes of like Saturn going from Pisces to Aries. But this is really the crux of why this moment is so huge, why this moment is so important in our history. Let's talk about Neptune. Let's talk about the planet Neptune. So Neptune couldn't be more different from Saturn. Neptune is all about spirituality. It's all about fantasy, like idolizing things. Neptune is about our dreams. It's about our visions. Neptune is very creative. Neptune disillusions things, right? Like Saturn makes things really clear cut. Neptune's like erase, 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 like draw a bunch of like, doodles all over it. It's going to make things more like less clear. And that is what Neptune does. It's a little bit confusing, right? It's a little bit nebulous in its approach. And again, it's just like really about that spirituality, really about that connection to the universe. Like it's a lot more about like our collective consciousness and the energy that connects all of us. And Neptune right now is at 0 degrees of Aries. It entered Aries on January 26th of this year. So when Saturn enters Aries, it's not like, oh, la-di-da, I'm Saturn and I'm entering Aries all by myself. It's meeting right up with Neptune. And that is really important to understand because that is going to shape what this moment looks like for us. So like I said before, we did have a sneak peek of Saturn and Aries, but Neptune was also there. So we had a sneak peek of this conjunction, Saturn-Neptune conjunction. Here are the dates up here if you want to just kind of remember these dates. May 25th of 2025 through August 31st of 2025. Really think about what was going on for you during this time. Was it a hard time? Was it a great time? What were the themes? What were you grappling with? That we're looking at a continuation of that right now. And it's not to say exactly copy paste, what will happen, but it's more like what is the cycle you're continuing to move forward with from that time? And what did you learn during that time that you want to do differently now? The conjunction will be exact February 14th through March 4th. Okay, so that's when they're both going to be really sitting at 0 degrees together. And so that's going to feel like the height, the peak of that moment. But in order to really think about Saturn and Neptune together, I mean, in general, if we just like look at these two planetary archetypes and we're like, Saturn is structure and authority and tradition. Neptune is disillusionment and confusion. You put those two together and you get a breaking down, Neptune, of our structures, Saturn. That means the way in which we feel like we are like helpless to the powers that be, right? There's like all these powers that be, the corporations, the government, all of these things that we just feel like have all this power on us and like there's nothing we can do about it. There is this moment right now where they are breaking down. And I think a lot of us can see this, right? Like we see all the mass layoffs at the huge companies, right? We see how the government is not operating like how it used to, and it's like a total mess, right? So like we see the little glimpses of this kind of falling away of what we thought was unmovable. Suddenly, like a mountain is no more, right? It kind of starts to disintegrate. And that can feel scary, oh my God, everything's going to change. Like, oh, like what's going to happen? I don't want you to be afraid. I don't want you to be afraid. You don't need to be afraid because we are all in the driver's seat of how these structures get to be rebuilt, on making these structures benefit us actually as individuals and our needs and what we really truly want. And I think like it's really interesting for you to look at Saturn and Neptune at 0 degrees Aries in your birth chart. See where that hits. See what planets hit that point. See what house that's in, right? And that can help you really understand, like, what's my part in this like new world order? What's my part in this new era, in this future of humanity? The babies that are going to be born this year are like, I can't wait to give them readings in like 30 years, because like they are going to be so different than our generation, like totally unrecognizable. We're really ushering in this new wave of human experience. Now, the last time Saturn and Neptune were both in Aries together was in the early 1700s. So it was like 1702 to 1705. And it was during the Enlightenment period, like right at the beginning part of the Enlightenment period. And it's really interesting. Like the astrologer Richard Tarnas has this great book, Cosmos and Psyche, where he really pulls themes from history and planetary alignments. So I do think it's really interesting for us to kind of look at themes from a time where patterns are repeating themselves, not necessarily saying, okay, copy paste, right? But understanding like the underlying themes and the archetypes of society at that moment. So when we think about the Enlightenment period, that was the scientific revolution. That was when we had thought leaders like John Locke and Galileo and Newton pioneering science. And what they were doing by doing that was really going up against the church, which was like, you didn't touch the church. You know what I'm saying? Like that was like, you can't change that. You can't touch that. But they still did. And they completely changed our reality as humans. And what they did was they really pioneered science. They pioneered reason. They were like, we want to lead with reason. We want to lead with logic. And that was like totally different from the time of like, well, just listening to whatever the church did and like this kind of fear of God that put on everyone. Thinking about even like all the excommunications that the church was doing. We look at this like Neptune as more spirituality, right? And Saturn as this reason and logic. And there was this emphasis on, this was like the first time people were really pushing separation of church and state. So there were these themes of like, what place does religion have in our society? And, you know, and really deeper with Neptune, it's like, what role does spirituality have in our society and in our, you know, the powers that be? And I think like at this point, you know, and listen, I'm no historian here. Okay. So if the facts aren't at 100%, please keep me honest. But, you know, the church at this point had like, they were totally beyond what they initially began to be, right? Like it was totally beyond Christianity at this point, like, right? Like the church was like totally ruling over everything and it needed to be taken down. It needed to be pulled back, right? That structure had to be disillusioned. So again, we're looking at this like structural disillusionment. And at the same time, we're talking about what relationship does spirituality have in our government and in our systems and in our corporations. So I think hopefully, and I'm an optimist, what we're going to see now is really that reintegration of spirituality in our structures. How are we integrating like real spiritual beliefs around like acknowledging the existence of another and empathy and all these things in our big powers that be, in our corporations, in our governments? And it's an interesting way to think about it, right? Like what role does spirituality play in our kind of human, physical, you know, money-making, capitalistic lives? So all in all, it's a big shift. It's a big moment. Even though we did see Saturn and Neptune together in Aries in the 1700s, they have never, ever, I literally went back in the ephemeris like to 3000 BC, okay? They have never come together at 0 degrees of Aries before. So I just like, as an astrologer, this is like, wow, this is like the coolest thing ever that we get to be here for this, that we get to witness this, because a map of the sky, you know, a birth chart, a transit chart, it's a circle. A circle has 360 degrees. And Aries is the first sign of the zodiac. 0 is the first degree of the first sign of the zodiac. So it is like, it's the 0 point. It is the infinite possibility point. It is like, if you're into tarot, you know, you look at the card, the Fool, right? When we look at that 0 card, the Fool believes anything is possible. Literally, like, you're at the beginning of your journey, and like this, not even the sky is the limit, right? And that's what we're looking at right now. When it comes to the structure of our lives, when it comes to our sense of spirituality and our creativity and our dreams. So it's this point where, like, again, with Saturn as that planet of manifestation, Neptune, that planet of our dreams, how are we bringing our dreams into reality? Literally, any path is possible. It's like the infinity point. So that's why I'm really excited. And I know that you might see stuff online and these themes and, oh my God, you know, all the fighting and Aries, it's like war energy. I get it. But I do think it is up to us to bring like the possibility and like the total, like, we can do anything with this energy that we want to. So I am really excited about it. And even more so, I'm so excited that we're building Lora at this time, because Lora is this place for us to integrate, you know, everyday spirituality. It's this place for us to like actually integrate spirituality into the daily structures that rule our lives. So I'm so excited to be building Lora. We're launching the summer solstice of this year. If you want to scan this code, you can join our wait list, get early access to stuff. You'll know about our events, that we're doing a bunch more free events for you guys. And I'm just so excited to be building this community as we kind of head toward launch. And then until then, we are launching our marketplace for our practitioners. So you can literally book a session with me right now if you just scan this QR code through Lora, and you're going to be able to book with a ton of different astrologers, psychics, you know, coaches, Reiki practitioners, mediums. So we want to create a place for you to connect with real spiritual practitioners. So you can book a reading with me there with this QR code. And I also have my socials here if you want to just keep up with me. I'm slightly spiraling on socials. So with that, I think we can do Q&A. Alexa, let me know if any questions have come through in the chat.
Yes, quite a few. So one of the bigger questions we got was more about, you know, Saturn return, some specific ones. One person specifically asked what it means when your Saturn is the same sign as your rising.
Yes. So if Saturn is the same sign as your rising, Saturn is in the first house. So you're going to be getting those first house themes, right? Of identity, of heightened responsibility, that really strong moral compass, and might have any changes to your appearance or, you know, your persona, things like that. So think of like, if it's the same as your rising, that's your first house.
Awesome. Some more questions are coming in the chat. Someone said, what does it mean when Saturn is with your south or north node?
Ooh, I love this question. So in the birth chart, if Saturn is on the north or south node?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay, cool. That's a really interesting question. So when it comes to the nodes, we're talking about destiny. We're talking about certain themes that you are pulled to learn in this lifetime to hit a higher level of your evolution. That would be the north node. In the south node, we're talking about past lives. We're talking about something that you have in abundance. And I think with Saturn sitting on the nodes, it really emphasizes the themes of the north or the south node. So it really emphasizes that. If Saturn's with the south node, I would say that you're kind of learning to let go of this heaviness and big sense of responsibility and big sense of having to be productive and always work really hard, right? But you also, with having, you know, south node and Saturn together, you are like a really, really hard worker. I would say like it's easy for you to like get lost in your work and work really hard and be really ambitious, and like super grounded and stable. And then with Saturn on your North Node, I think you're here to like really hone in that hard work mentality, to learn like what it is to really work hard at something and bring something from idea to launch, like bring something to fruition in your life. That's part of your destiny, to really like hone the lessons of Saturn and to really, like really take on more of like that hard work. And like that sense of responsibility, like taking on a higher sense of responsibility.
Cool. Someone asked, how can your Saturn return change when you have an active stellium in that house?
Oh my God. Well, that's just like you, Alexa.
Mm-hmm.
Can I call you out right now?
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay. Alexa is an Aries rising, and she's also got Venus and the Sun and Saturn and Mercury in her first house. Okay. So for Alexa Saturn return, yes, we're going to be pulling in the themes of the first house, right? Big shifts in identity, big shifts in persona. But also, we were actually talking about this the other day, like heightened commitment to her relationship when it comes to Venus, right? Really committing to a partnership in some way, changes to the relationship. So that's going to be present. We're also going to see, it's like a double whammy with the Sun and the first house, because it's like the Sun is so much of how you express yourself, and kind of like that core creative expression. So I actually think with the Sun there's going to be a heightened sense of confidence, because with the Sun Saturn conjunction, there is more of this like lack of self-assuredness. And I feel like with the Saturn return with the Sun there's going to be more of a sense of confidence, like more of a willingness to be seen. And then with Mercury there as well, just like big mindset changes, letting go of any limiting beliefs, any kind of like mental narratives that we have. Maybe she commits more to her writing practice. So that's kind of one example. I think it's like pulling in the themes of the planets that are also there with Saturn will be present in the Saturn return. Does that make sense?
Love that. So well said.
Thank you.
That's
Sorry,
awesome.
I had to call you out there, Alexa.
No, it's awesome. Someone asked, how would someone with Saturn in the 11th, 0 degrees, approach this return?
0 degrees Aries is your Saturn?
I'm assuming it says Saturn in the 11th house, 0 degrees.
Wow.
The return, yeah.
Wow. Very cool. Okay. I feel like, remember Neptune's there too. So, and remember when we were talking about this 0 degree point, it is so much about this infinite possibility, this beginning. And with the 11th house, I really do I feel like with this Saturn return specifically, like I want you to really think about the 11th house as the house of the futurist. It is the house of like envisioning how society can be. How can I elevate my community? How can I be a bigger part of society around me? And so I think for you, that can look a lot like being more of a trailblazer in your community, being more of a social leader, a pioneer, maybe taking some risks when it comes to even so the 11th house opposes the 5th house. So the 5th house is about like our creativity. And the 11th house is where we share those creative projects. So I would even say if there's something that you've been wanting to share with your community, share online, take that risk. Take that risk and share that thing with your community, share it online. I think that's really important. It's going to be really important to like be bold in your community. So it is like, I know the 10th house is more of like a publicity, but you will really feel like you are getting more visibility in a sense. Like more people are going to be affected by what you do. And I think, yeah, just like in terms of how you're really thinking about things is like, how can I lift up, everyone else? How can it's not just about me, it's about like all of us and the community at large. But that's really exciting.
Awesome. Someone asked, what does it mean if I have opposition between Saturn and Neptune?
Oh, interesting. Okay, wait, sorry. On the last question, I just want to say for you in the 11th house, also think about, because you have 0 degrees Aries, think about what happened May through August of last year. You need to journal about that time and you will get a lot of insights from that. Okay, Saturn opposing Neptune. That's really interesting. So in your birth chart, I think like, Saturn opposing Neptune. I think it could go a few ways. The first way I'm kind of thinking, I know I'm kind of just like looking at that aspect in a vacuum. I'd want to see like the whole chart, but archetypally, how I would think about that is your ability to like keep it together, have structure in your life, be consistent and committed. That's kind of hard for you. Neptune is kind of clouding your ability on the Saturnian thing. So Neptune is clouding your ability to like work at something disciplined, right? Like you may struggle with your discipline. You could struggle with, and again, like, you know, Saturn opposing Neptune on its own, like people, like a bunch of people in like the few weeks that you were born have this aspect. So don't think like, oh my God, it's just me. Like it's, you know, I would also look at the other planets involved, but there could be, yeah, a little bit tough around really like sticking to something and committing. Like you might kind of have like start things and not finish them. And then on the flip side, you could have like this heightened reverence for spirituality. You know, you could have this like big feeling and responsibility toward like your higher power. Like you might even be religious. So that's how I would look at that opposition.
Cool. Okay. Someone said that they ended an engagement abruptly and unexpectedly in November of 2025 after a really hard time starting in May 2025. They're terrified for what Saturn Aries might bring, but they already let this person go. And so they're wondering if they might be better, kind of more context there. And they said that their Saturn is in the 9th house.
Wow. Okay, well, first of all, you are so strong. Like, I honestly, one of the strongest things you can do is cut off an engagement that is not aligned with you. Like, that is one of the hardest things. And I think, like, the lessons of Saturn can be so hard, can be so, so hard. And they really are meant to, like, bring you into your more elevated, more mature, more like just like clear and aligned version of yourself. And these are life lessons that you're meant to learn. Sorry, is this person Saturn in Aries or in Pisces, or they didn't say?
They didn't say, I don't believe. Oh no, Saturn Aries. Yes, Saturn Aries.
Oh, they have Saturn in Aries. Okay.
I'm terrified for what Saturn and Aries might bring. So Andrea, if you're still in the call, feel free to correct. But
yeah, let me know.
Aries. Yeah, they said Aries.
In Aries. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so Saturn in the 9th house in Aries. Okay. Yeah, I'd be interested to see what planets Saturn aspects as well, because breaking off an engagement, I wouldn't say is like super 9th house, but I would say, you know what's interesting about the 9th house? Steve Arroyo writes a lot about this, that the 9th house, yes, travel, culture, learning, all this stuff. But really, when we think about the 9th house, we think about self-improvement, like self-development is actually seen in the 9th house. So I do think it's really interesting that like seeing this breakup through the lens of how is this like an act of self-care that you did? How is this like an act of actually betting on yourself and this act of self-development that this was? You know what I mean? Like, this was a massive, massive, massive elevation in your own sense of self, in your own sense of confidence. So I think that the 9th house, if you look at it from the lens of self-development and self-improvement, I would look at how ending this relationship improved your life. In what ways does this relationship not existing in your life anymore improve your life in the long term? So I would think a lot about that. Do not be scared for what's to come with Saturn and Aries. You already went through the hard part. You already went through the toughest part. So really for you, and like, again, like just so incredible, you know, that you did that. And now it's a continuation of that. I would really like, now it's like you went through that hard time from May through that May, and then by November, you decided to make the break. So I think what May really brought up for you is when Saturn entered Aries initially, Saturn did its thing. You felt uncomfortable. You had to shed your skin. You were like, oh my God, I don't want to do this. I'm scared. I'm no supposed to, like, this isn't right, right? The Saturn return is a lot about shedding of the skin. Okay. Like a snake shedding its skin. So you were feeling it, that Saturn brought the discomfort, the feelings. And then actually when it re-entered Pisces again, those Pisces themes came back of endings, of surrender, and of letting the relationship go. So from November through now, you've been in kind of like mourning, right? Like you've been grieving this relationship, and I'm sure, you'll continue to be mourning this relationship. Being engaged is a huge deal. But I think that what you can look forward to with Saturn and Aries is beginning again. And I'm not saying you're going out there and dating again. I'm saying you're really building yourself up again. You're really betting on yourself again. Like that's what a lot of the ninth house is about. Like maybe you do go on like a huge like solo adventure or like a girls trip. Maybe you decide to like commit to learn something new because of all this new time you have on your hands, and you realize you have these passions that you weren't committing to before. So I would not be scared. The worst is over. And now it's about rebuilding, starting again, for sure.
Someone also asked if you have any recs for good journal prompts or themes to look at for that time period, which was like May through August, that kind of time period we were just talking about.
I'm literally obsessed with the journal prompt. Okay, let's think of some right now. Okay, so I would say number one, literally, I would like go through your phone, go through your photos, go through your calendar, right? Like look at your texts, like what was going on during that time. I want you to like list themes of big and small. It could be totally personal, it could be internal, it could be with other people. I think listing like literally what was happening, what were the themes. And then I would, a good prompt I think for this time is, what was the prevailing story you were telling yourself at this time? What was the story you were telling yourself at this time? Saturn can give us like a story, right? Like of how things should be, what they shouldn't be. And sometimes that story is in the driver's seat. So I think asking yourself, what was the prevailing story at that time? I think, what was I working toward at this time? Where was I putting in all my effort, right? Like where did my effort go on a daily basis? Saturn's a lot about effort. I think another prompt can be like, what was uncomfortable? What was so uncomfortable about this time? What was I uncomfortable about during this time? Or even like listing, like, what were the stressors of this time? What were like the main things that were like, that were stressors, or that like you were really focused on, or that, were kind of issues for you at the time. And then I would also maybe ask yourself, like, as I move into this new phase, what do I want to do differently? What do I want to do differently? Right? Maybe before you were like totally like you had given up, you were crying, because you were just so frustrated. Like you just, sat and watched TV the whole time, and whatever. Sometimes that's what you need. But maybe this time you want to have different coping mechanisms. Maybe this time you want to, not feel sorry for yourself, or whatever that is. I think like asking yourself like what you want to do differently. And then the last thing, kind of similar to that, but I think through all of this, like distilling, like, what is the lesson that May through August taught me? What is the lesson? And there could be a few lessons, there could be one big lesson, but Saturn always brings a lesson. So I think really through all this information and digging, distilling the lesson is going to be really important for you.
Awesome. I think we have time for maybe like one or two more questions. Someone asked if Saturn is transiting my 7th house, but I'm a Saturn Taurus 7th house. How will that impact my relationships?
So Saturn in Taurus is in your 7th house, but it's Saturn is entering your 7th house right now.
I believe that's what they're saying. Yeah.
So, okay, so you're probably like early on Taurus, Saturn and Taurus. So I think it's interesting, right? Like Saturn in the house that it will be when it returns, but it's not yet in the sign. So I think that you can still really look at the themes of the 7th house for you during this time, during these next 3 years. And especially with Saturn coming together with Neptune, wherever it hits in anybody's chart, you are really breaking down a structure in that realm of your life. And you're really like experiencing a lot of change there. So I would say in terms of relationships, if you're currently in a relationship, maybe you decide it's not for you anymore. Maybe you decide to make some changes in the relationship, right? It doesn't mean necessarily it's going to end, but maybe you guys really like have a big sit down and like really talk about, you know, how it is you want to operate and what it is you want. I also think that if you're not in a relationship, you can experience some changes there. Maybe you meet someone, maybe you, with Saturn and Neptune together, like there might be this like kind of like whirlwind romance. Like you might like find yourself in fantasy or something, and like really just like get super obsessed with this person and kind of wrap the structure of your life around them. So I would just be wary of like making sure you maintain your sense of independence. Yeah, those are some things I would say. But obviously, if you're Saturn and Taurus, you know, you're still kind of building toward this big moment in terms of relationships. Like, I don't know, like maybe it's like, maybe you meet someone with Saturn in your 7th house and then you end up getting married during the Saturn return, you know, or like it's kind of like builds on each other.
Love that. Okay, maybe time for one more. We have a lot of Aries 9th house Saturns, really funny.
Okay,
Someone else said, I have Saturn in Aries 9th house at the 29th degree. Any advice? I'm getting enrolled back in school and I'm finally leaving my hometown. I heard 29 degrees she'll feel it the whole time versus just the exact degree.
Yeah, this is such a funny thing with Saturn returns because it's like, I know people who like, they have like, you know, a bunch of my friends had like Saturn at 1 degree of Pisces. And it's like, okay, did their Saturn return? Like, I think it's like they just have more of like a longer tail at the end. And for you, you're going to have more of like a front end Saturn return. And like once it's exact, like that's kind of like the big finale. And then it'll shift into Taurus and like it'll kind of be like the end of the Saturn return. So yes, I agree that it will be the whole time. I feel like it's the strongest once you get with like a 10-degree orb. So once Saturn hits like 19, which is actually pretty soon. Saturn's going to move pretty quickly this year. That's when you'll feel it really, really strongly. But yes, I would say like you're starting your Saturn return, but it won't peak until 29 degrees. I love that you're going back to school. Literally perfect. Higher education. You're moving away. I'm assuming you're moving like far from your hometown if it's 9th house. And I'm guessing it's like in service to school, which is great. So I think like it's interesting. Like sometimes the Saturn return, like, and I gave some examples of those experiences. Like not every single Saturn return is like, oh my God, like everything's different. Like my life is ripped to shreds, right? It's not always like that. It could be as simple as I went back to school, I committed to my education, I moved away from home, and I like totally like up-leveled my life in this big way through my education and my cultural experiences. And that's fabulous. You know what I mean? And that's a great Saturn return. So I think like, don't like wait for this other shoe to drop. You know what I mean? Like that's not the energy. I think like really, like we were talking about before with the 9th house and like self-development and personal development, allow this like to be a time where you are curious. 9th house is all about curiosity. So I think like allow yourself to be a seeker, allow yourself to explore and Saturn can give you some lessons that way, through the books that you're diving into, through the trips that you take, through the new kinds of people that you meet. So I think really just thinking about like having a spirit of curiosity and just like letting that move you through this experience.
Amazing. Okay, well, I
Oh my
think
God.
that's everything we have. I know that was a lot.
Guys, the
Thank
Q&A
you.
is so
Yeah.
fun.
No,
Wait,
this
sorry,
is
then the last thing, we have our next event. If you want to
yes.
register, it'll be for, guys, eclipse season is so soon. Eclipse season starts on Tuesday. And then we're going to do a free workshop again on March 3rd, lunar eclipse in Virgo. Jessa is amazing. And she's going to take us through like this eclipse and what it means and what eclipse season means for us in general. So definitely register. And I just like want to thank you all so much for coming. Your questions are amazing. Yeah, Alexa, is there anything else?
No, this is amazing. Thank you guys so much. As we said, we're building Lora. It's going to be so awesome. And this community is really important to us in the early days. So obviously we'll be hosting many virtual and IRL events in New York City and beyond. So stay tuned. I know Michelle has dropped the Discord in here a couple times. We're very active in there, but if you want to continue chatting, there are a lot of around 6,000 more astrology friends in there. So yeah, we'd love to see you in there, and we'll be following up tomorrow or later today with kind of a recap email. We'll send over this presentation and a recording from the call, additionally to anyone who couldn't make it as well. So truly thank you guys so much for coming. It means so much. And thank you, Michelle, for doing this. So informative, so beautiful, so incredible. So truly thank you.
Thank you all so much. Such a pleasure. You got this. Go out and get it. We're excited for Saturn and Aries. We got this.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for coming.